In this video, I am joined by Mr. Matthew Muir. We are talking all about the Walt Disney Company's future. Is this the same as it was in the 1980s when Disney was really looking on the outs and possibly a target for a takeover, a breakup? Or is the situation today much different? We're also going to dive into some Nelson Peltz and that whole situation up next on OG55. Welcome aboard to another episode of OG55, where I am joined by the one, the only, Mr. Matthew Muir. Welcome back, Matthew.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you on, sir. So, if you have a Twitter handle, I will link it down below, even though you're not really active on there anymore. But I'll still link it. But if you can share with everybody your Instagram handle, which you are much more active on.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Matthew Thomas Muir. It's all one word.
Perfect. And I will be linking it down below. So definitely give him a follow on Instagram. So Matthew, let's talk a little bit about the Walt Disney Company. So in the 1980s, before Michael Eisner came in, the Walt Disney Company was really struggling. You know, it was really, I think the Japanese were kind of circling around, seeing if maybe they would buy pieces of the Walt Disney Company, break it up, sell it off into pieces. The animation department was not doing good. They were kicked out of the studio and they were working out of bungalows on the lot. I mean, it was a bad time for the Walt Disney Company. Michael Eisner came in and kind of fixed everything, and they came out stronger. Now, right now, we're going through a very difficult time as well with the Walt Disney Company. You know, no doubt about it. We're hearing talks that Disney might sell stuff out, like ABC, what have you. Maybe ESPN, we'll see. But what do you think, Matthew? In your opinion, do you think what we're going through right now is the same as what we went through in the 80s, or is it a different set of circumstances?
I think it's a very different set of circumstances. I think it's more reminiscent of what happened back in 2004.
That's a great point, and I would actually agree with you on that.
Not quite as bad as it was in the 80s.
Not quite as bad. I agree, because here's the thing too that's protecting the Walt Disney Company right now is its sheer size. Disney's a much bigger company than it was in the 80s. In the 80s, it was kind of a smaller entity. I mean, not kind of. It was a smaller entity, studio, theme parks, and that's pretty much it. It didn't really have a whole lot. So they didn't have a lot of assets that they could even sell off if they needed to stay afloat. And also being that small, they were much more of a target for takeovers. But by 2004, like you said, Matthew, Disney was a much bigger company. Not as big as it is now, but they were bigger than they were in the 80s. And I would agree with you on that. Now, do you think that we're at a disadvantage right now, though, that we don't have a Roy Disney to kind of protect the brand?
Yeah, I think we are.
Yeah. Why do you think that?
Because right now our Iger seems to have too many loyalists inside.
Yeah, well, and then we'll get to that too later on when we talk about Peltz, because that kind of ties into that. But there is an issue with that when you have too many people, too many yes men, right? Telling you everything you do is great, and that's what we're hearing. We're hearing that that Iger has a lot of that on the board and what have you, and you need to have that. You need to have that kind of that push and pull, the checks and balances to kind of, I think, to have the most effective governing strategy for this company, which is, I think, why we've talked about it a lot before in the past on the channel, where that co-CEO kind of role, or the duality of like a Frank Wells and a Michael Eisner, or a Walt Disney and a Roy Disney, works best because you have these two people kind of working and pushing and pulling on each other. Right now, we don't have that. We have Bob Iger, and from what we understand, a board that pretty much rubber stamps whatever he wants.
Mm.
So it's a tough situation. Do you think that the board is going to start to, I mean, and we don't know for sure, we don't know the inner workings of the board. This is basically what we're hearing. But do you think because things are more tumultuous right now, that the board will start to break away from Iger a little bit, or do you think they're in it for the long term with him?
I think some of them might start to break away, but it might take something more severe.
Okay, and what would be that? What do you think would be
like if the stock price falls too low, for example?
Yeah, no, that would do it. If it gets into like the 60s or the 70s or something, that might end up doing it. Now, would you, if it does get that low, let's say it gets into like the 60s, or 70s, would you support them removing Iger, ousting Iger?
Yeah, which chances are they probably would.
Yeah, that'd be a tough one. That'd be a tough one. Yeah, that would be a huge shakeup for Disney right now. Now Disney's trying everything they can to sort of get their financials in order and to kind of get a little healthier on the financial end of things. There was a rumor the other day, not even a rumor really, I think that it's actually happening, where where Disney's talking with some Indian companies and even like millionaires or billionaires out there in India, and they're going to sell their India streaming presence out there for
which they definitely should.
Okay, I was going to ask you. So you agree with that decision?
Yeah, because it's not making them as much money anymore.
Well, yeah, and India, from what I understand, India, they don't pay that much for the streaming, right? Like, isn't it like $1 a month or something crazy like that over there? They're not that much on them, and I heard the ARPU over there too is not great. So it's been a drag on the company. Now, if they can get 9 or 10 billion for that streaming presence in India, that's pretty solid. That right there, that's the Hulu, the Comcast's portion of Hulu, pretty much, give or take. That would help them out tremendously if they were to do that. So I think that's a good move. Now, do you think that's a sign of desperation on Disney's part, or do you think that's just a smart strategy?
Smart strategy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If they were to have to sell something larger like Marvel or Lucasfilm, then that would be a sign of desperation.
I would agree. Yeah, if they were to sell Marvel or Lucasfilm, that's definitely desperation. That's like the whole ship is sinking, and like, what do we do? This is kind of like, these are the kind of things that I expect Disney to offload. When I heard that were looking to offload things and become a little leaner, these are the kind of things that I was expecting them to do. Stuff like this, linear television. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's a sign of desperation. I think it's more of a sign of just like, hey, look, they're looking at the chessboard. And it makes sense. It's not really like one of their core. It's not like a core foundation for them over there. So I think it'd be fine. Now, Nelson Peltz has entered the ring again. Okay, and he's back for round 2. What are your overall thoughts on Nelson Peltz's return?
I honestly think it might be promising for the company, because Iger needs someone who's actually willing to question his decisions.
Right. And we talked about that before, where we need somebody who isn't a yes man. Now, last time that Peltz did this, Iger and the board really fought back. I mean, they really pushed back on him, and ultimately they staved him off. What are your thoughts on this time? Do you think there's going to be that big fight again, or do you think Iger is going to say, hey, look, you know what? I'm going to work with you. What
I think he's probably going to make a deal with Peltz. In this particular case, it may be necessary.
I would agree with you, Matthew. I have that same feeling as well. A lot of people think it's going to be like a bloodbath, and there's going to be this huge fight, and it's going to be worse than round 1. I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be a huge fight. I think Iger does not want another war. He has enough on his plate right now that he's dealing with, and I think that what he'll do is he'll probably give Peltz maybe a seat or 2 on the board. And work it out with them. I think that would actually be the smartest move anyway. Like you said, we got to get some different voices in there, to offset all the Iger loyalists. And you stave off a potential disastrous PR mess. I mean, if Iger and Peltz are publicly fighting like they were in round 1, that looks bad for the Walt Disney Company. It's bad optics. It's probably not great for the stock price. It could do a lot of damage, I think, to Disney. I think the best move is to work something out with him. Now, Iger has to be really careful, though, Matthew, as to who he allows on the board. I mean, hopefully that's part of the negotiation process with Peltz. I mean, you want to get people in there that are good, that understand the Disney brand. I just don't want like corporate, like marauders in there, and they don't understand the Disney's a different animal. We're not talking about
and that's why there's some concern. I think that Peltz might not be in it to genuinely save the company. He might just be in it for himself.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, what do you mean by himself? For himself? What?
He's just trying to make himself look more like he cares about the Walt Disney Company than he truly does. And it's just trying to lull Disney fans into a false sense of security. And then there's a possibility that once he's on the board, he might just start making the same decisions as Iger, or potentially recommending even worse decisions.
Yeah, that would be a disaster. That would be a disaster. Hopefully it's not the case, Matthew. Hopefully it's not the case, because I do believe he will probably get a seat on the board, or one of his people will probably get a seat on the board. So hopefully they have good intentions, and that is not the case, so we'll have to see. But it's weird, though. We heard this news break like a couple weeks ago, but nothing from Peltz, right? I mean, have you heard any public statements or anything from Peltz this time around?
No, nothing at all.
Isn't that weird? Like the first time he was very public. I think he even had like a website or something, right? This time, nothing. I don't know. I don't know. Look, we never heard officially from Peltz that he was going to do this. Maybe a lot of that stuff that we heard in the media was rumor. Maybe it's not true. He did. It is a fact that he did up his shares of the Walt Disney Company. That's a fact. But does that mean that he's necessarily gonna wage war again? I don't know. It points in that direction, but it's just weird to me that we haven't seen anything. Really, really weird. You find that odd?
Yeah, I find it a bit odd.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's pretty strange. It's pretty strange. Now, since Peltz, the Peltz news broke a couple weeks ago, Disney stock price has actually been doing pretty good. We're up at I think it's around $85 a share right now. Obviously, way off its highs of just a couple years ago. It was 120 a couple years ago. But it is going up though, because we were really. It was going down. It was closer to 80, not too long ago. Now it's 85, 86. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of the Peltz thing? The market likes that, or do you think it's something else at play?
I'm not sure, or to be honest.
Yeah. I don't know either. I don't know. It did go up a little bit with the Peltz thing. I don't know if that would carry it this long though. It's been a couple of weeks. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe Wall Street just kind of likes what they're hearing from Disney. I have no idea. Maybe they have a lot of faith in this new movie Wish that's coming out. I do feel like there is a little bit of momentum with that movie. Like it has a potential to do well. Could be that. I don't know, but the Marvels isn't tracking very well, so that's going to be interesting. What do you think about that, by the way, Matthew? The Marvels.
Just never really been that into it.
Yeah. Well, that's a big movie for Marvel, but the thing is with that is look, the tracking is pretty low, but it's kind of unfair to compare it to Captain Marvel though, because Captain Marvel was the lead up into Endgame, right? And it's of course that movie's going to crush more than it normally would because it's leading up to that huge event movie Endgame. This movie doesn't have that. So it's unfair, I think, for people. And I don't even like Captain Marvel. I didn't even like that movie. But it's unfair, I think, when people say, well, the Marvels isn't tracking the same as Captain Marvel. Well, it's not going to track the same. The situation's different with the franchise, MCU, and everything like that. But with that said, though, it is still pretty low. So I don't know. But Wall Street doesn't seem too worried about that because it doesn't seem like the stock price is really taking a huge hit over that. So we'll see. But overall, any final thoughts, Matthew, on what we've talked about, like Nelson Peltz, the Walt Disney Company? Anything you want to add before we take off?
I would probably say the situation this time is definitely different, but it's much harder to know this time how the Walt Disney Company will turn out at the end of all of this. It
is harder. It's harder to predict. It's I'm the forever optimist. I do believe we will be okay at the end of the day, but I do think we will see a very different Walt Disney Company by the end of it. Like they're going to sell some stuff off. It's going to be different, but I think we're going to be okay. But Matthew, I want to thank you. It's always a pleasure having you on, brother. And we'll get you on again soon and talk more Disney with you. I will be linking his Twitter and his Instagram down below. So make sure you follow him. He is a very passionate Disney fan. We love Matthew Muir. He is family here at OG55. And again, Matthew, thank you for joining us today, sir.
You're welcome.